Welcome to the SoLoMo Show, a weekly podcast hosted by Cory O'Brien, the social media strategist at Heat and author of thefutureofads.com.
And I'm Adam Helway, CEO of the digital marketing agency Secret Sushi Creative.
Each episode, we discuss topics, trends, tactics, and tools related to social, local, and mobile marketing and advertising. Our goal is to give you the information you need to be a better marketer. Today is Tuesday, April 23rd, 2013, and this is episode number 66.
In this episode, we're going to discuss Foursquare's updates, connected devices, focus twist, Tumblr's new mobile ads, and much more.
Nailed it.
Oh, awesome. All right, there we go. Okay, a lot of cool stuff. In fact, I think the funny thing was last week we said, let's go ahead and try to rather than sort of, we usually kind of collect all the things we think are interesting up to the moment of, like, literally the day before an episode. But this last time we said, look, let's think about what's the theme going to be for the next one, and hopefully nothing exciting happens between now and then. But I won't say there's anything, say, earth-shattering, but there's a lot of interesting things that happened since last week, I think, huh?
As always. I mean, if nothing happened week to week, this would be a tough podcast to do. The world of social, local, and mobile, always filled with new and exciting things. So we're going to do a nice little mix of recent news, recent announcements, and some interesting forward thinking, some forward projections from Adam and myself, kind of looking at the world of connected devices. So that should be interesting.
We need to get our little in the year 2000, like what's his name? I want to say what's his name is. It's got the same last name as you, Conan O'Brien. I don't know if you've ever seen that skit where they talk about what's happening in the future, and then suddenly the year 2000 came, and it's a little hard to talk about the year 2000 being the future. Do you know which skit I'm talking about?
No idea.
I'll have to show you sometime. I think a few folks, hopefully, that are listening will hear it. So I'll step back and let you start. What's on the docket first?
So first up, we've got our stat of the week, and this is going to be something that we'll revisit later in the episode. So consider this a appetizer for a later story, but I've got some new statistics out of Foursquare with some interesting implications for how you might start thinking about the site. And what we're talking about is that, Foursquare, according to their official user numbers, they're claiming 33 million users. But in a recent web interview with The Verge, they actually announced that they have 50 million people that come to the site every month. So 50 million unique visitors to Foursquare.com, which is significantly more than the 33 million registered users. And most of that traffic is driven through Google searching. So I thought this was interesting because, oftentimes I even get stuck in this sort of thought process about Foursquare of thinking, okay, it's all about the users, it's all about accessing that data inside of the application. But really, this actually kind of positions Foursquare the benefit to be more in the SEO search world versus just the application users itself. It actually, the audience you could potentially reach through search is larger than trying to focus on Foursquare users specifically. So that kind of jumped out at me as a stat worthy of sharing. And we'll talk a little bit in later on in the episode about how Foursquare is making some changes to address that sort of non-user web audience, but still the people that are getting access to that data via Google and via other means. So interesting stat there. Is that something that, you've thought about, Adam? Not just users that use the service, but also people that sort of, I guess, the dark web of social media, where it's people that aren't logged in, they're not a user, but they're still accessing content through some of these social networking services.
Kind of the lurkers, huh? I didn't really think that Foursquare was making that much of an impact, but I think, as you're saying and alluding to, I think as we discuss some of what we have in the lightning round related to this, we'll see that they're definitely making a play for the location-based SEO results, which currently are for the most part dominated by Google with Places, with their Places page, or Google local pages as they're calling them now, and then Yelp. So I think we'll dive into that just a little bit more a little later.
Before we get to that, let's dive into our main topic. No sense in waiting any longer. And today we are looking at the potential of connected devices and other screens, both the opportunities and sometimes the challenges that marketers and advertisers are going to face when using some of these connected devices. And, I think it was spurred in large part by the rollout of Google Glass. A lot of the early Google Glass users are finally receiving their Google Glass. They're getting to play around with it. But we've been looking at a lot of technologies. You've got Nike with Nike Running. I've been using that a lot. The sort of Nike Fuel band that came out. Then you had the Jawbone Up and the Fitbit and all these sort of data logging trackers. You've got the emergence of car technology with cars that are talking to your phone, that are talking to the internet to pull all that data together. There is a whole world of connected devices out there. So which one of those kind of subtopics do you think we should start on, Adam? Anything that has tickled your fancy more than the others in the last couple months?
Well, I wanted to set the stage a little bit and getting people to just think initially about sort of the mother of connected devices or grandmother, so to speak, one of the first ones, which was, of course, the desktop computer when it became connected to the internet, and everybody trying to figure out how to market to folks who were viewing the screen back in the day. And it was primarily with, display advertising. I mean, that's what Google has underpinned their whole everything they do for the most part. Where they make their revenue is through advertising, and they were really early in they were first to market, so to speak, in doing so, and then things sort of stayed that way for quite some time until finally we had mobile. And mobile, I would say you could divide into two different experiences, which is definitely the mobile smartphone. So, you've got the form factor there, and then you've got tablets, which are additionally kind of perpetually connected if you've got a 3G or 4G tablet, but are usually primarily, as we've talked about on the show, used for consumption. It's good. Many people use them for actually shopping and using shopping applications. Whereas the smartphones themselves are actually used as sort of this buddy and tool to augment your experience when you're actually out into a market or out into an actual retail store. So I mean, I just want people to think of those sort of computing devices initially as the sort of starting ground for. But as you were talking about, there's a whole slew of other devices, some that are really just for capturing data, but some that actually have a heck of a lot of promise. And I actually, if I just kind of quickly, I think those are the future ones, the ones that we're starting to finally come into their own and start developing platforms for, is the TV, the car, and then pretty much anything that is wearable and connected to the internet. Those are sort of the three not discovered countries, so to speak, just yet, that are starting to blossom at the moment. Would you agree, Cory?
I think, yeah, those are definitely some of the more interesting areas. I see some challenges with each of those, which, is one thing that I wanted to sort of mention as we go along, just some of the interesting things that I see. So, starting with the TV, one of the challenges that I see there, and I see this in a couple different industries, but I kind of call it the Apple problem, which is, if Apple really embraced it, it would be essentially mainstream overnight. But until that happens, there's just so many competing small players that it's hard for anything to really gain a mainstream adoption. And, I see this playing out. I had a Google, I think they just called it Google TV. It was the sort of competitor to Apple TV that Google had put out. It was that Logitech box. And, huge promise. Oh, you're going to be able to run applications, and you've got a keyboard, and it's now a smart TV. And it just, the software wasn't there, the hardware wasn't there. It was so frustrating that I ended up just unplugging the thing and removing it entirely, because it was actually making my TV experience worse, not better. So I think, TVs, you hear a lot about smart TVs and, the new Panasonic or the new Samsung or the new Toshiba TV has all these applications, and it's, maybe powered by this Google platform that they've modified to run on their TV and blah, blah, blah. And, I think the promise always sounds there, but it always seems like, oh, next year, this is going to be the year of connected TVs. Next year, it's coming next month. It's, just always on the horizon. And I just don't see a lot of improvement there. So I'm interested to see if you've had positive experience with connected TV, or if this is just sort of, a hope that at some point the TV gets to a place where it's more than just watching, it's sort of interacting with the content.
Yeah, I think that TVs on their own, standing alone, that TVs themselves. I mean, when it comes to looking at it from a consumer's perspective and watching a TV and having the internet connected to it and so on, I don't. I think the experience that everybody thought that they wanted to have early on is not, in fact, the best experience. Nobody really experienced it yet, so they were just all going, "Oh, this is going to be awesome! We're going to be able to tweet directly from our TV and do all these sorts of things." But that it doesn't work well that way. It doesn't work well because typography and being able to actually watch something on TV and then suddenly see all these tweets coming down and all that sort of thing. So I think rather than say merging the experiences, I think actually that the experience of television and ability for marketers who are on TV, whether it be due to programming or due to sponsorships they're doing with programming that's happening at any given time, or they themselves are advertising with it. I think it's going to take a couple different flavors. I think one, it's going to take the shape of actually what you're doing on the social web to augment the experience that people have online. So it's not going to be through the TV, but it's going to be in conjunction with primarily live television that is happening. Did you see? And I thought that I shared it with you, but did you see the demo for Bluefin Labs? And did we I'm trying to remember if we even talked about this last episode, but Bluefin Labs was the company that you brought to my attention that was acquired by Twitter. And they were at All Things D last week, and they did a really interesting demo where they were showing what their technology does and that they're actually mapping conversations that are happening on Twitter and actually whatever's public on Facebook and elsewhere in real time to programming. So they know in a way what is happening during a particular show, the content that's happening, the discussion that's happening, and they're able to map a bunch of things directly to points that are happening within the show. And then they even break down of those conversations. For instance, they showed I think it was the Ford commercial during the Super Bowl where it was really this American style. It was like, I forgot what the guy's name was. It was a radio host and he was talking about being an American or farmer. That's what it was. Remember about God made a farmer. That's what the thing was. And they were able to show the exact type of individuals who were actually engaging with Twitter and talking about that particular advertisement during the time that it aired, breaking down the demographics of them, the things that they were interested in, the things that they tweeted about, the sort of folks that they followed, all those sorts of things to build out a demographic persona of this, which I think is a really interesting way to gauge how you might do follow-up campaigns and follow-up advertising. Did you hear anything about that, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I didn't hear anything. The way it's described there honestly sounds a little maybe, but demographics for who's watching TV, I think that's not a new technology. So it'd be interesting to see if they went above and beyond or what it was doing differently. I think one of the opportunities that when you said sort of augmenting the process of watching TV, we've seen this with brands that embrace, these award shows and that sort of thing where they're creating content and engaging with the actual award winners and trying to jump into that conversation. But that's because they know the audience is going to be, tens of millions of people. It's huge. One of the challenges and one of the opportunities could potentially be to integrate yourself into a conversation on a smaller scale. So some of these shows that they don't have tens of millions of people, but they do have, 1 million, 2 million people that are watching it. But maybe that audience is a better fit for your company. So yes, it's not an award show with 10 million people, but maybe you're not the type of company whose customers would be watching an award show. Maybe they're watching a Discovery Channel. They're more into the science of things or something like that. So I think that could potentially be an opportunity. But, again, maybe I'm just not understanding the potential benefits of the Bluefin Labs above and beyond just grabbing demographic data.
Well, I think it's also in conjunction with, obviously Nielsen ratings and getting demographic in that sense, but actually doing it now, taking advantage, because we know that there's been a partnership recently with Nielsen and Twitter as well. And I think that this has played into it, that this is sort of data that is happening in real time, stuff that Nielsen is not. I don't know a heck of a lot about exactly how Nielsen captures your data, but stuff that I don't believe is easy for Nielsen to accomplish without this technology. It also, I think there's also opportunities to take advantage of what you get from Bluefin and even the data that's there to help for instance, Twitter, help it understand better how to quickly provide more relevant advertising with their sponsored tweets and so on, because an element of their sponsored tweets is not just simply turning it on and turning it off. It's actually paying to have Twitter in a way analyze a little bit of the content that's happening around your tweets and seeing the level of engagement you're getting with a particular tweet or set of tweets, and then amplifying the ones that seem to be getting the most engagement. And I think that the data that they end up getting in real time around this, because we've also talked about the fact that Twitter's a place where you don't necessarily predetermine an ad a week in advance or even a few days in advance. It's a place where you can react fairly quickly, and you could put together advertisements very, very fast in order to react to things that are happening in real time. And so that's what I think it plays into is it is what's bolstering Google's ability to understand, I keep saying Google, Twitter's ability to understand the content that's happening on its network in real time. And it recognizes event-based sort of, events, things that are happening, time-based events, as being important things that people use Twitter for. Campaigns such as, the presidential campaign, world news events such as, obviously what happened in Boston and other places, but additionally things that are happening like award shows and TV shows that are getting large-scale conversations. I think that is what Twitter is making a big play for.
So jumping topics a little bit here, I think what kind of got us excited about this in the first place was the rollout of Google Glass. So maybe let's talk a little bit about the potential we see, because, obviously neither you nor I have our hands on a Google Glass unit. And really at this point, it's very early in the process. The development cycle, Google said that any application can't even charge for the application. You're not allowed to run advertising inside of your application. So really, we're at step 1 of 100 of rolling out Google Glass and the potential for it and what this could mean for the future. But maybe if we just talked a little bit about what gets us excited about Google Glass, what are the opportunities, what are some of the potential challenges that they're going to have to sort out over the next couple of years as this type of technology does get more into mainstream adoption.
Yeah, I want to hear what you think first, Cory.
One of the big opportunity obviously is you're reaching people in a very intimate way, but in sort of it's not passive, but you're not, it's not like a banner ad on a website where you're looking at content and all of a sudden in the midst of other things is a banner. It's kind of you have to, get somebody to actually look at you. You're up in the corner of their vision and they're interacting with the world around them, and maybe they're walking down the street and they see an interesting ad pop up or something that kind of calls their attention to the Google Glass. So they look up and they check it out. I think the potential for that is pretty big. That's the dream that everyone has of geolocation, where, I'm walking around and, I like steakhouses. So as I'm walking around, it's dinner time. I want steakhouses to sort of woo me and say, we've got great reviews on Yelp and check out this special. And hey, if you come in the next 10 minutes, we'll give you half off, and tell a friend and the meal's on us and that sort of thing. So I think that's a big potential. The challenge I see there is much in the same way we're seeing Facebook kind of become the gatekeeper with the Facebook EdgeRank and newsfeed and all this, where there's just so much data that the platform actually becomes the decider between what types of messages get shown.
Yeah.
And right now, some of that decision is kind of influenced by who's got the bigger wallet. So there is the risk of, I really want to reach this customer, but the guy down the street wants to reach him and wants to reach him $10 more per opportunity. So, I just don't have the budget to actually get there, because there's obviously going to be a lot of messages coming in. So, is it Google? Is it the user? Who's going to be able to kind of decide what information or what offers eventually reach Google Glass and thus the person wearing it?
I mean, in that essence, that's a bit sort of, there's a way to pay for access and there's a way to engage for access or for mindshare, right? So when you're when you understand how to engage with folks, for instance, on Facebook, the algorithm the odds are in your favor in that sense. And of course, you could just go ahead and pay to have more access when you haven't really earned the right to be viewed or to gain access to that feed, which is really finite. People think of it as infinite because it's digital and it's just pixels, but it's finite. There's only a certain amount of page views per day and per week and per month from an individual, and you either are there or you're not there during those page views. And so if you're actually engaging with folks and they're engaging with the content that you have, then most of the networks so far really want to give you to put that out there. They want their experiences to be sticky and to be a place where you want to spend time. And by just strictly showing advertisements from paid folks is not going to make that happen. But we're not talking Facebook in this case, right? We're talking actually Google and the opportunity for Google to basically fence off anybody else. If you're looking on the web, if you decide that you take Google Glass and you look on the web, that might be one thing. You might be able to see unfiltered results or the same sort of results that you might currently see. Or if you decided to visit Facebook via Google Glass. But for the most part, the information, as you were saying, could be really siloed off from the whole Google experience. Google Local might be the place that's feeding you the data that you're being provided rather than, say, Foursquare, which we talked about earlier. The social stuff may only come from Google Plus instead of, say, from Facebook, because it isn't going to always be the traditional web view of seeing a browser on the screen. It's data that could pop up and actually be augmenting your reality, right? This is an opportunity for augmented reality to finally become something useful, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. And that's potentially a benefit, but it's potentially a detractor. We've seen Google time and time again pushing Google Plus above all else, and yes, some brands sort of have a presence there, but I keep seeing a lot of people that just they don't like Google Plus for whatever reason. They're not adopting to it, and so if suddenly Google says the only way to reach Google Glass is to do so through Google Plus, our brand, is that going to be the thing, the straw that breaks the camel's back and actually gets people to engage with their Google Plus page? I don't know. It's definitely not initially. When there's 10,000 people walking around with Google Glass, you're not going to spool up an entire Google Plus page just to engage those people. But I think that's, like you said, it's one of the challenges is that, yes, you're going to have access to data, but Google, initially at least, is going to be the one deciding, is it pulling in tweets? Is it pulling in Instagram? Instagram's now owned by Facebook, which is arguably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, rival to Google right now. So it's sort of hard to imagine them saying, Facebook, by all means, you can sort of create the Facebook home for Google Glass and take over that entire experience. I don't see that happening.
If they do treat the operating system on Google Glass in the same fashion that they have with, the other devices, that may become the case. I don't know if, for instance, the Google Experience devices, the ones that are actually manufactured directly from Google, are going to allow themselves to install Facebook Home. But you were bringing that up, and that's sort of I kind of was thinking of this whole thing of taking over the experience, right? With Facebook Home, Facebook is attempting to not have to create their own device or not have to fight somebody else for screen time. They essentially create this layer because it's allowed via the operating system, which is Android and won't ever be in the iOS operating system, but to take over the entire experience layer. So that's what they did in order to increase their ability to market on Facebook, market on the mobile device in a way that was very different than if they were just sort of an app that somebody turned on and accessed in there. And Google, in a way, is doing the same, except for obviously they're taking it a step further and saying, but our data set can augment everything you do every single day. It can be something where when you get a text message, boom, it's on your eye. When you need information, boom, it's there. When you need directions, boom, it's there. All of that stuff is there. And in what shape or form it takes. And you see this foreshadowing of the fact that they are telling people you can't do anything with advertising on our platform. You can't charge or put any data on there that's going to charge. It's super interesting to see that we've seen that happen before with Facebook, and we just talked about it last week with Twitter, where Twitter itself was saying, sorry, you can't do this. We have these content cards or whatever they call them, right, that we allow people to build, but these two companies went ahead and built ones that would allow people to actually spend money on items directly within Twitter for the first time. And Twitter said, nah, we're not allowing that. And so at what point is it stifling opportunities for folks to advertise and market on these platforms when the platforms are solely controlled by the big, 2, 3, 4, 5 social networks that we're talking about that ultimately start to layer themselves into other technologies, whether it be, Google Glass or the Android phones or potentially social TV.
I've even seen that. So one of the other categories we talked about was cars and sort of the connected automobile. And the car that Aaron and I actually got recently has Ford Sync in it. And Ford Sync is this, Ford sort of global platform. They're trying to actually integrate it into as many of their cars as possible. So instead of each Ford car having a unique dashboard, it all revolves around this Ford Sync. And, I feel like every couple months I see some headlines of, Ford Sync to open up to application development and Ford Sync to sync with your, mobile applications and pull in mobile data and all this stuff. And again, it's sort of this, it's always a couple months down the road. And part of that is, like you said, it's that control of the platform. Ford has sort of been slow to release APIs, and they're still the gatekeeper for what apps can and can't get developed for the car. And so, I'm seeing things like, we've got, certain music streaming applications, but other music applications aren't yet on the platform. And, we're working with this one group, and it's all, it's each deal that gets struck is trying to carve out a unique audience and leverage some of the, the branding around it and that sort of thing. So I think it's an opportunity for these brands, but they also see the potential in it. And they say, okay, well, if if I control this platform, there's a lot more value to myself as a company. So I'm going to do anything that I can to really, be the company, be the decider of what can and can't end up on this platform, and thus in front of these users.
At CES recently, they talked about, and we brought this up, I think it was in January, where they talked about the two major car makers, Ford and Chevy, releasing an SDK and all that sort of thing. And I myself have an older model car. I don't have all that stuff in there just yet. The next car that I will have will definitely have it because most cars are starting to actually integrate that thing, but it still hasn't reached its full potential just yet. But I think some interesting things is that if we could sort of imagine what might be the most popular forms that things could take, I think it would be music and it would be location-based services. I see obviously Pandora and Spotify and radio and all these other social music applications basically being primed and ready to go. They have very little that they need to do other than to basically create an experience that's more optimized for somebody that's going to be in a moving vehicle. I think that's the biggest change that we'll see in the sort of user experience is how do you create an experience that's easy for the average person to manage all of the new information and stuff that they'll have, but do it safely. And I think that even Waze, the app Waze, Waze, that we both, I think I use it actually fairly often. When I feel like whenever I trust Apple Maps, then I'll dive into Apple Maps. But for the most part, I actually use Waze for my navigation and such. And they've done some really interesting things there where they've almost in a way got sponsored stuff where like if you want to get, I think currently they only do it for gas stations, but they might show on their navigation that there's a special going on at a gas station that you're not far from. And if you're a Waze member, then you can get, something like 5 or 10 cents off of every gallon of gas. I think that sort of thing is actually really interesting and foreshadows how even such a service as Waze, a navigation app or navigation service, could actually monetize it and provide opportunities for gas stations or restaurants and other places. Maybe even at a gas station, Red Bull is having a promotion and then they want to access drivers and say, if you come to buy Red Bull at this gas station here, Waze customers get a coupon that they could use at that very moment for, $1 off of a 6-pack of Red Bull or something like that.
The last category maybe we could touch on today is the sort of, I don't even know what you'd call it, the third screen, the micro screen. And a lot of what this is stemming from is the constant rumor that Apple's working on the iWatch. And the rumor got so strong that other companies responded.
What do you watch?
The iWatch.
Oh, all right. You're talking about a product, not iWatch. Okay, got it.
Sorry. The Apple, iWatch. Not the Apple that I watch. the Apple iWatch, the rumors got so strong that other companies were responding with like, well, we're making a watch too. They were responding to a fictitious product that doesn't technically exist yet. But, so many people got, well, at least so many vocal people got so excited about the prospect of a connected digital watch that, companies started jumping in and saying, oh, well, we're working on that. And, maybe sometime we'll eventually release it. Who knows? But what do you think causes all that excitement around the sort of iWatch concept, the connected watch, or even the just smaller connected gadget that augments your mobile phone? Do you think it feels like Dick Tracy, or does this seem like there's actual some uses to it that people are looking forward to?
See, the problem is that once we get beyond the car, even the TV's a little borderline, but because the TVs aren't really moving in the smart direction, they're just being connected in a way. But if we look at mobile phones, anything that we've already been using for a while, phones, TVs, computers, and the vehicles. Beyond that, everything else just becomes actually sort of sidekick connected devices to one of those other devices. So, for instance, the Pebble Watch has been out for a while, and that was on the Kickstarter deal, and that got millions of dollars in funding, and people went out and bought tons of those. And it's a little e-paper watch, so it's not even in color. And it sits there and it does things like when you get a tweet, you can make the tweet show up on your watch, or if you get a text message, the same thing. You can control the music on your phone from your watch. But again, I'm talking about things. It is the portal. It is using another device. It is using the phone as its sort of master, and it's the slave. So it's one of those things where I think the mental mode of the folks who are using those devices is to use it as an extension of their smartphone already. Whereas we need to see somebody really feel like they're interested in using a watch for the sake of using the watch by itself, and for that watch to be something that people use as the go-to device, even if it does become connected. But in most cases, it seems like the thing that when your device is in your wallet, or your pocket, that when you get a message, you go and you pull your wrist up and you look at it. And then if there's something you want to act on, you go and you get into your pocket. And if somebody were to abuse that by advertising on that platform, even one too many times, it's going to become a thing where people just go, I don't want to, that's not the experience that I expected with a watch. They kind of expect it when they're doing certain things on the phone, but not necessarily to have this thing vibrating on their arm and then going, oh, by the way, bleep, bleep, you've got something going on. So unless people, I think people will be averse to that behavior if people don't become averse to it, if people actually enjoy maybe walking around and suddenly having a Foursquare alert pop up on their watch to tell them that a friend is near, that sort of thing. Because it's really, to me, a watch is more about notifications and alerts than it is about like anything else. And the phone is always connected, and therefore between the need for connectedness between the phone and the watch is really simple. It's Bluetooth or whatever, because those two are going to be in proximity with each other for the most part. And if it's not, the watch does what? It nicely degrades to a timekeeping piece. But the second that you don't have a connected device with you, a phone primarily, you don't have that connection to the internet anymore with the watch, unless Wi-Fi becomes ubiquitous, or unless watches can have 3G and it becomes part of your AT&T, plan or something like that. So I think I see a lot of obstacles, both in the user experience and in the technology that would have the watch take off as anything more than sort of a companion piece to other pieces of technology that are out there.
I agree with that, but I think that the companion piece is probably, of all the things we discussed, the thing that has me most excited. I'm admittedly, a fan of the concept. I had the watch strap that attached to the iPod Nano, and I actually still use that thing, and that's not even connected to my phone. That's essentially its own kind of dumb device. And so I think just the potential of it, though, even if it only took notifications from your phone and put it on your wrist or put it on some sort of external device, that's essentially what Google Glass is doing in a way. Google Glass it put it up here by your eyeball, and this mythical iWatch would put it on your wrist, and you'd have to lift it up to look at it. But I can just see so many interesting possibilities. And yes, I agree with you that the second, every time you look at your wrist, it's like, oh, come get a $5 off an Arby's sandwich. And you're like, I never eat at Arby's, and I would never, even if it was free. that gets annoying and you like throw the thing away. But already I've got the application set up so that, I've got the Starbucks app on my phone that pushes a notification to my phone when I'm near a Starbucks. So you're out walking about and, it's sort of alerting you, oh, you could check in over here, you can use it over here. Square is enabled on it. So, with my phone, I've already got the ability to walk into a Starbucks. Starbucks can ping me and say, hey, you're close by, come on in. I come in and then I pay with my phone. The problem is, normally I get those notifications either like 3 blocks down the road when I finally take my phone out, or I just don't get them at all because I'm not, you're not walking down the sidewalk staring at your phone. If you're one of those people, you're probably, annoying those around you like myself that are just trying to get somewhere. But if Starbucks, the application, had the ability to say, okay, you have installed the Starbucks application on your phone, therefore you've given Starbucks permission to, give some sort of above and beyond messaging to you, and then Starbucks could push that notification to your wrist, I think it unlocks a whole new potential because, yes, it is a lot easier to just look at your wrist and say, oh, I see the Starbucks icon, therefore I must be close to a Starbucks, and you could walk in and order yourself a coffee. Or, like you said, maybe it's something like a highlight. I think highlight becomes a lot more interesting when a little highlight icon appears on your watch and just has the name of your friend that's close by versus your phone buzzes and you've got to take it out and you're sort of stopping what you're doing to engage with this new type of information versus a smaller augmenting screen. The whole concept is you keep doing what you're doing and you just have a lot of additional information at a glance. So even if it's only connected to your smartphone and only providing a subset of those functionalities, if it's the right functionality, I think that has probably the biggest potential just because, out of the gate, you've got hundreds of millions of people that have smartphones already, and all it's doing is you're adding this little bit of extra screen real estate that suddenly unlocks a whole bunch of new features.
Which is much more accessible, right? When it's on your wrist, it does become much more accessible. It does have the potential in a way to become something. I think Google Glass has the potential to become adopted by the sort of elite early adopters, the folks that, like the military, to be honest, and other folks that might be using it for sort of a utility in a way like to augment what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So if, I remember seeing a really incredible video about, it was like how could augmented reality help you? And it was this guy who was a mechanic and he had the glasses on. He looks at the car engine. It sort of scans the engine and actually shows him, it could tell what sort of car it was and then told him the part, where the part would go, and then said step 1, step 2, step 3. And so as he's doing this, what he's looking at is immediately augmented in real time with good information as he's having that experience. That I could see happening with something like a Google Glass. It becomes a tool that people want to use for certain types of experiences, or people like, you or I that are just really geeky and want to adopt that stuff and use it. But I see the watch as an opportunity to basically do something that feels less intrusive. It's something that feels, kind of, how you feel about those guys that walk around with the Bluetooth things on their ear the entire time. That's what essentially is the Google Glass folks are going to be kind of looked at as that. And I may become one of them once they become, but I see the watch as being potentially that step of we accept wearing a watch. It's not that big of a deal. I can mute it, that sort of thing. But there isn't this sort of perpetually on my face, perpetually feeling like as the person's looking at me, are they recording what I'm doing or not? That sort of thing. And it's an interesting thing because I like watches personally. I think you do too. Just watches in general, both as sort of, jewelry items and kind of craftsmanship pieces. And there's a movement of people that don't wear watches, don't see a value in it because they've got their time on all of their iDevices and phones and all that sort of thing. And that over the last, I'd say probably 10 years, folks have been finding less and less use for wearing a watch. Then suddenly we swing back around, and if they find a really interesting way of tying that back together as a companion piece to your mobile device, then suddenly it's like a revolution of why you have this thing on your wrist. It's not just to tell time. Telling time is just sort of the default state that it's in. But all these other things that you described as well become the new watch. The reason you wear a watch, funny enough, is watch sounds like it's something you actually do with your eyes, right? And so to actually have something on your wrist, and now you are watching it, you're using it to watch what's going on around you in conjunction with your mobile device. So I'll say, if the use is correct and everything, I think based on some of the feedback I heard from you, Cory, I'm a little more bullish on the watch concept. I think what you've said is it's okay if the watch is just a companion. It doesn't have to be the center of attention, and that is the cool factor of it, the useful factor around it.
And, I think all the stuff that we're talking about, some things, yes, connected TVs, car dashboards, that type of thing, that's starting to arrive. But a lot of what we're talking about here is at least a year, potentially 2 years out. Google, it just started getting in the hands of developers, and I think they've even acknowledged it's not shipping to consumers until next year.
2014,
yeah. The Apple iWatch type thing, that hasn't even been acknowledged, so that technically doesn't exist at all. So I think we're looking a couple years out, but it is just always interesting to, kind of peer into the future and imagine what some of that potential could be. So definitely a lot of opportunities, a lot of challenges, a lot of things for these platform owners to sort out in the next couple of years, but it'll be fun to watch. It'll be fun to participate in that and hopefully, test things out as they become available and see what works and figure out, fail fast and learn some lessons from that, and then find hopefully a happy medium that makes everybody's lives a little better.
You can tell we're really we enjoy the topic because we've gone longer than we'd like to for this episode just to do that. But what time is it, Cory?
It is lightning round time.
I've not yet listened to that table drum roll on the actual recording of the podcast.
Oh man, it sounds good. Let me tell you, it is authentic.
I would like to hear anybody tweet or message in to tell us if it really does sound good or it surprises their eardrums every single time we do it.
All right. Well, with 60 seconds on the clock, you want to take the first crack at the first story?
Sure. Let's go for it.
All right. 60 seconds on the clock. Ready and go.
So Tumblr is, a content network sort of almost between a full form blog and a microblogging platform like Twitter. Really popular platform. And they finally have launched their first foray into, I said it wrong there, foray into advertising with mobile ads. They have not had a mobile they have not had a mobile app out for that long. And not too long ago, I'd say probably a year ago, they launched it. And what they're doing is they're going to be inserting ads into the content that people are viewing. They're only going to allow 4 to be shown per day, I guess is what they said, to any individual who's viewing it, who's viewing content, and that the content will actually be very clearly marked as advertising with like a dollar sign with like moonbeams shining out of it or something like that. So, I think we'll hear a little bit more from you on that, Cory. You're a bigger Tumblr user than I am.
All right, 60 seconds on the clock. Ready and go. I think this is interesting, though at the same time, it's also a little scary. So the thing that's interesting is Tumblr finally embracing advertising. They really lightly dip their toe in the water with these kind of sidebar ads. Some brands embrace them. And now they're saying, all right, we're going to test out mobile ads. The thing that I think worries me a little bit is it's sort of big budgets here. They're not saying, oh, Joe Schmo can, now run an ad and be kind of exposed to all these Tumblr users. It's like Joe Schmo billionaire, Joe Schmo Coca-Cola can, pay us $1 million a day and, sort of invade the stream of content with the advertising. So I'm hoping this is just them, testing it out, something that they could develop a self-service platform for that would allow other companies to target and not just make it kind of a plaything for these wealthy companies. But right now, it is sort of big brands that are able to utilize this. So we'll have to see how this feature evolves. All right, 60 seconds on the clock for story number 2. Ready and go. So this is a story that we alluded to earlier in the episode. Foursquare is rolling out new business pages. And this is essentially in response to the fact that they've got 50 million people arriving on their website each month as a result of Google searching. It's kind of them taking on Yelp. And, at first I was like, is this even necessary? Like their pages before weren't bad. They weren't amazing. I think that the new pages are definitely a visual improvement. It does some nice things with arranging content and sort of putting the important information up front. It does what I wish every single business website does, which is have address and phone number and hours at the very top in plain text. You don't have to hunt it down, so that part's cool. It also brings this metric they've kind of invented called people like this place. So unlike Yelp, where you're sort of reviewing it, Facebook is using things like check-in data to create a rating, and they're giving that more prominence. So definitely something to check out as a business owner. All right, Adam, 60 seconds on the clock. What's your take on Foursquare's new business pages? Ready and go.
I do agree that they've differentiated themselves from being just sort of the 1 to 5 star rating model to gauge popularity of a particular or even relevance to a particular location or business. The thing that I found most interesting, because I actually tried to bring it up on my iPad and I didn't see the new pages yet. And I don't know if it's because they differentiate between what they consider mobile web versus desktop web at all or anything like that. The thing I found the most interesting was that they're making a conscious play, and they note in the article that Google likes X, Y, and Z, more of this type of content or that type of content. And so therefore it's going to show us in better, in more prominent rankings on results. And so they understand that in order to be more visible than Yelp, they need to be better on the results. And therefore they've made the quality of their pages better for not only the individual, but actually directly for Google themselves in a desire to appease them.
It's an interesting dance that they're playing, and hopefully it keeps them going. I keep worrying that like Foursquare is throwing all these features out there and saying like, well, it's gonna work because they're struggling a little bit. Maybe I'm just reading too much into it, but as a very adamant Foursquare user, a very high frequency Foursquare user, for me, like anything that keeps Foursquare going for another couple years is fine by me. They can keep trying. Just keep the doors open. Don't shut down.
Yeah,
don't go all on me, Foursquare. Don't go all on me.
I had my friend Claire. I think you know Claire, and she was talking about leaving to go overseas for a week or two or something like that. And she's like, we really haven't had time to plan, and we've been trying to figure out what we want to do when we go over there. And we were just going to say, once we get there, we'll deal with it. And I just said, Cory likes to just go out and use Foursquare. He just goes and he says, look, whatever we find on Foursquare we could use. And she said, you know what? I never thought about that. And so I'm really interested to see if she follows through with it and just kind of gets there and then suddenly brings up Foursquare and sees, what sort of things it suggests for her.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, lots of great stuff this week and plenty more to think about as these stories unfold. If you'd like to get in touch with us, whether it's to ask us a question, suggest a topic, give us feedback, or even if you just want to say hi, we definitely encourage that. The easiest way to do so would be to reach us via Twitter. We're both available at SoLoMo Show, or you can reach myself directly. I'm at Cory O'Brien.
And I'm at Secret Sushi. You can also email us. We both check that out. The email is solomoshow@gmail.com. That's SoLoMoShow@gmail.com. We also have, of course, a Facebook page, and we share things that we discover and find interesting between shows. So just go ahead and search for the SoLoMo Show on Facebook, also on Google+. And we have an account on Pinterest. We do have a Twitter account, which you mentioned already. We have an account on Pinterest where we have most of our shows in video format. You could share video on Pinterest, and you could go ahead and find those and repin those to your heart's delight.
There you go. And all the links that we discussed today, as well as the links to the social channels that we just mentioned, can be found in the show notes. And if you have yet to check out our show notes, the easiest way to do so is to go to solomoshow.com. Each episode gets its own post there. We include show notes. It's both links to the things that we discussed. Oftentimes we include supplementary links. It's a way of just diving deeper into these stories. So if something piqued your interest, definitely check out the show notes to get a little more information and, kind of dive deeper into these stories on your own. And again, if you, dive deeper and you're like, I had a thought, I want to share something or run something by the guys at the SoLoMo Show, definitely send us an email, hit us up on Twitter. Just let us know. We'd like to get that type of feedback. And with that, we will call this episode a wrap, and we hope that you join us next week for another episode of The SoLoMo Show.
Take care.